Ark, Executive Vice President and Chief Economist at the Conference Board, joins me right here in the Mumbai studio. Welcome to India, Bart.
Thank you for being here, Monica.
I know we want to start talking about the leading economic index that the Conference Board has developed for India, and it doesn't paint a very pretty picture for India. But before I get to that, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the U.S. We're seeing this political turmoil. It reminds us of 2011. Now, in 2011, it did roil markets. We did see a credit rating cut. What do you think this time is going to bring us?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I mean, today's news was actually altogether reasonably positive. The second quarter holding up reasonably well. Also, we had a little bit of an uptick in the first quarter, which was actually a weak quarter. That was upgraded to 1.1. So that was all kind of okay. Then these unemployment claims that you mentioned, I think that's also good news for the labor market. But we really need to look forward. And there's still some real threats in the economy itself. First of all, there is the labor market, as you mentioned. I mean, unemployment remains very high. Unemployment came down last month, but it comes down for the wrong reasons. I mean, labor force participation is declining in the United States, so we need to add more jobs rather than see people leaving the labor force. So that's a major concern in going forward. Luckily, we had this number today. But then there are some other threats. Investment doesn't look really very promising in going forward. It picked up a little bit in the number that we got today for the second quarter, but in looking forward, it's still way too weak. Profits actually have been downwardly adjusted, probably by about 10 billion, so that isn't going to paint a very nice picture. And then, of course, we have exports. Even though exports is not such a big part of the U.S. economy, with this weak global economy, including India, which we'll talk about in a minute, that's not going to look promising. And then, as you say, down the line, there is the politics of all this. So we're going
it's not down the line, but it's right here.
It may, as you say, it may actually start tomorrow. So the government shutdown is one thing that might potentially happen. The bigger worry, in my view, is the debt ceiling debate. If we get into that indeed in 2011 created a huge uproar, and hopefully that will not happen again, because that could really push down growth. But still, I mean, even without that, this fourth quarter will probably show us about a 2% growth rate, so it will be much less than the 2.5% growth rate. And even in the final part of the year, without all this trouble, I don't think the U.S. economy will grow much faster than 2.5%.
Okay, so 2.5% is what you're looking at for 2011?
No, for the final part of the year. For the year as a whole, given the weakness in the beginning of the year, we would drop below 2%,
Below 2%?
Yeah, for the year as a whole.
All right, so every time we've hit on a government spending situation in the U.S., and we've hit upon it fairly frequently in the last 2 years. 2011, we ran through something pretty similar. Then we had the fiscal cliff last year. We had the sequester early this year. And it sort of creates panic for a bit, but then we managed to get past it. My question is, this time round, we're experiencing this at a time when we know that the Federal Reserve is going to start pulling back, whether it pulls back in October, November, December, or early next year. So that confidence of unlimited liquidity isn't there in this market. What kind of double whammy impact could this have?
Well, I think, first of all, I think the surprise, at least to some, the surprise that the tapering did happen in September, I think actually sent a sign to the markets that the Fed will only do this if they really see an improvement in the economy. We were not so surprised ourselves at the Conference Board, because the economy wasn't really that strong. So in the end we thought, well, this was the right decision for the Fed to take. Now, of course, the Fed basically said, if the economy shows strengthening, then we may do that. So don't be surprised that if the economy is going to accelerate to 2.5% or more in the fourth quarter, it's going to happen. But if it remains as weak as it is, then I think we're very likely to see the tapering further delayed, probably well into next year. The other thing that is very important to keep in mind is that there is a change of mindset in the United States. We talk about recovery, but it's really hard these days, 5 years after this financial crisis started, to speak about recovery. We're really now talking about why is it that the U.S. economy is growing so slowly. And really, the Fed cannot have this quantitative easing going on forever just to prop up the economy.
Despite $2 trillion of cash injection into the economy, you're disappointed with growth. Imagine what happens if the Fed starts pulling back and you have this political overhang. So the question I'm asking is, are we headed into more uncertain times when it comes to the fundamental economy in the U.S. and therefore, by extension, the markets as well?
Yeah, so the question, I think, really is what signals, how will the Federal Reserve find the exit? But they will look for an exit out of this quantitative easing. It cannot go on forever. But at the same time, I think they're very cautious not to do this at a time that the effects on the economy will be very negative. So that's why I would say, let's keep watching the real economy in the United States, because that's to a large extent determining their numbers, including the labor market, by the way. That's very important.
Fair enough. So you're expecting realistically the taper to start next year, given what